Hey guys, I'm back with a new video. So in this video, let us start with a new topic that builds upon the foundation of asynchronous JavaScript that we covered in great depth in the previous videos. The topic is HTTP requests. Now, we know that in every full stack application, we have two ends that interact with one another all the time to drive the business logic of your application. So one is the front end of your application. So let me denote this like this. So this is your front end of the application, and the other one is the backend or server side of your application. So backend. Now on the front end of your application, you have the browser on which the client side code gets executed, and this is the side which represents the user interface of your application. And on the server side, which is the backend, that is remotely located somewhere, it runs on a domain, and both these ends are completely decoupled from each other. And here comes the concept of HTTP requests, which serves as a mechanism for communication between your front end and back end of your application. So on the front end, whatever data you want to fetch from the back end, you can place a request to the server like this. So you will issue a request to the backend if you want to fetch some data from the backend, and you will get the data back. You can also create a resource on the server, all handled using requests, which we'll see later. The server, on the other hand, interacts with your application database, so it may interact with your application database. So let us say this is your database, and it interacts with the database to fulfill the request of the front end of your application by sending the response to the server. So we get the response back to the front end of your application. So to place a request to the server, you need to specify the URL or the address of the server. So URL of the server is required when you want to place a request to the server. To configure a request, you need to specify the URL first, and also the HTTP method, which denotes the type of request. And we have a bunch of them, such as get, post, put, delete, and more. So these are the main ones. So get is used for fetching a resource from the backend, post is used for creating a new resource on the backend, put is used to update an existing resource on the backend, and delete is used to delete an existing resource on the backend. So now we have some knowledge about HTTP requests. Let us see the entire mechanism of requests and responses in action by writing some code. So we will be using a fake JSON Rest API to understand how HTTP requests and responses work in practice. So currently we are on JSON placeholder API. So this is the API that we will be using. The link for this can also be found down below. The one thing you need to understand is that this API is a dummy API. So anything that you do with the data that you get from the API will not persist in the actual data store, as I earlier told you that this is a fake JSON Rest API. So for this demo application that we will be building, you can find the link for the starter files down below this video. So let me explain what is there in the starter file. So in the starter files, we are using Bootstrap CSS, and I've defined some custom CSS as well. So we are using some error classes like error feedback and success feedback. Currently they are disabled because currently we will not be having any error. Okay, so whenever our application will face an error, then we will set the display to block. So we'll add the class of error to the class list of a particular element that will describe the error message as block, and that particular error will get displayed. And similarly for success feedback, but initially they will be set to none. Okay, so these are some styles that I've defined. And a class for list group, so cursor is set to pointer. Let us see the HTML. So here we will display the error, and then we have defined the input field. So the user will enter some title for the post, then some description for the post, and then when he clicks on the button, will basically submit a form and will prevent the default action, and then we will create a new post. This is your success feedback. So once you will delete a post that we'll be working on, so here we will render all the posts that we get from the backend from our fake JSON API. We will render that here, and on clicking a particular post we will delete that. So let us start with the implementation. So first I will say window dot add event listener. So I'm adding a listener to the window object, and I will listen for DOM content loaded event, and I will say initialize application. Then we will take a reference for the form object, so the entire form that we have in our UI, and then the list group that we will basically render all the posts that we'll be getting from the fake JSON API. And here I will define a function that will initialize our application once the DOM content gets loaded. So function initialize app, and I will say console log inside the initialize app call. So let us go to the browser to see if this works or not. So as you can see, now we are getting inside the initialize app call. So we'll make use of the fetch API to send a request to our fake JSON API to fetch the list of posts. So before that, let us set our references, which is the form and the list element. So set references, I'll call that here, and then down below I will make a function called as set references. And for the form, I will say document query selector form, and for list we will say document query selector. It has a class of list group, so we will say dot list hyphen group. So as you can see here. Now to fetch the post, I will define yet another function, fetch posts, and let us define the function for fetching the posts from the backend API. But before that, I will define a custom send HTTP request method that will basically send any request that we try to make from our front end. So that will be a method that we can configure for sending any request. So I'll say send HTTP request, and this will take on the method, the URL that you are targeting, and the data if you want to pass any data to your request. And then I will say return, I will say fetch. Using fetch, you will be able to send a request to the backend. So you will pass on a URL that you are targeting, and then we will define an object, and in the object we will set a method. So whatever method we will pass here, we can set that to the method key in our object, in the configuration object that we are passing as a second parameter to the fetch invocation. And then we will pass some data, so body if any. So if we pass any data, that will get passed to this and will be set to the body key of our configuration object. Now some APIs may require headers to get passed along with the request. Now in order to identify what type of data you are sending along, for example, so headers are a metadata that you can attach to an outgoing request, which I will show you when we will make requests to the JSON API. So the headers are configured by you when you are sending the request, and hence they are known as the request headers. The response that you get from the server also has headers configured with the response, and that are known as the response headers. So let us define a key for headers, and I will again set an object here. So if you want to configure the headers to the outgoing request, you can add them right inside this headers object. First, let us set the content type header to application JSON, because here we are dealing with JSON data, which is typically the case for most of the web applications that you will build. And once the request is done, this will return us a promise to which we can tag on .then, and we will get the response. So we need to check whether we are getting the desired response. So if the status of the response, so if response.status is greater than or equal to 200, 200 denotes OK, and it is less than 300, so it lies in the range of 200s to 299, so in the success range, then you can return response.json. So we'll parse the response and we'll return that. As the response, if it doesn't lie within this range of 200s, so we can say return response.json. Then you will get some error, and we can log the error to the console. What I can do is I can create an error, so I can say new error and say something went wrong and throw that error. So after the then block, I can tag on .catch. I will pass the error to this, and let us log this error to the console. and then I can say const error new error, and again say something went wrong and throw the error. So this is our configuration method that will basically configure every request that we are gonna send from our front end of our application to the backend. So let us now define the method to fetch the list of posts from the backend. So I can say function fetch posts const posts, and I will reach out to the backend API. So I will say send HTTP request, then we'll specify the method. So for fetching the data, we will use the get request, the URL that we want to target, which is https JSON placeholder typecode.com/posts, and we'll pass no data as the third argument. Okay, so we're not gonna pass any data to it because the get request is used for fetching resource. So once you get all the posts from the backend, then you can define a new method render UI and pass on the posts to it. And since we are using the wait keyword here, we have to decorate our function with the async keyword. Okay, so let us wrap this in try catch. So try catch, and if we get any error, we can go to our catch block and say const error new error. We can log this error to the console log error and new error something went wrong, and then throw that error, throw ex. So before defining the render UI method, let us log the post to the console. So I'll say console log posts, and let us go to the browser to see the output. So since fetch post is an asynchronous function, we'll have to decorate our initialize app with the async keyword and decorate our fetch posts with await keyword. Now let us see the output in the browser. So you can see we are getting all the posts. So we are getting a list of 100 posts logged to the console. Now let us pass this post to the render UI method and render a UI right below the form. So let us go back to our Visual Studio Code and define a method called as render UI. So I will comment this out and uncomment the render UI function, and I will say function render UI, pass on the posts to the render UI function, and then I will say posts for each post that we are getting back. Let us log the post to the console.log post, and let us see the output in the browser. So we are getting all our posts logged to the console by the render UI method because we cycled through all the posts and we are logging each post to the console. So in each post we are having user ID, an ID, a title, and a body. Okay, so we'll extract all these things to form a new post that will help us in rendering the post list to our browser. Now here what I want to do is I want to create an li, a list item with the h1 that represents the title of the post, and then some description pertaining to the post inside a paragraph. Also attach an ID to the post, which will help us in deleting the post later. So let us comment this out, and I will say const post item, and each such post item will be a list item. So I will say document.create element. We will create a list item dynamically. So li, so we are creating a li. To the li I will add a class post item dot class name, and I will give it a class of list group item, and then I will give the li that we just created an ID of post.id, and then we will create a post title. So post title, and that will be a h1 tag. So document.create element, pass on an h1, and then we will say post title, and I will set the text content to post.title because the title of the post is defined on the title key of our post, okay, that we are getting from the backend. Then post description document dot create element, and that will be a p tag. And then I will say post description dot text content post dot body. And then to the post item, that is within the post item we will nest the title and the description tags. So post item dot append child, so this will append the post title as a child element of our post item. And then post item dot append child, so we'll append the post description and we'll nest that within our post item that we just created. And then we will finally append the post item or the list item that we just created. We configured it and we just made the marker for that with the required data, and now we can append that to our list. So list.append child post item, and let us see what we get in our UI. So let us go back to the browser. So you can see we are getting a list with each list item being rendered to our browser. And let us inspect the structure of our list items in the elements tab. So you can see in the div class container, first we have the form, and below this we have a list group. So we created a li with a class of list group item. We gave it an id. Then we appended the title for each post and the description of each post within the list item. So we appended these two elements as children elements for our list item. So now let us define a function for creating a new post, and right above our fetch post function invocation I will say bind events. So we'll bind all our events for the application in this function. So I'll say function bind events, and then the form that we got here, so form, on the form I will add an event listener for the submit event. So I will listen for the submit event, and once that occurs we can create a new post. So now let us create a new post by defining the method create post, and this will receive the event object, and I will decorate the function with the async keyword. Now I will use the try catch block for error handling, and let us prevent the default behavior of the form submission, because we will be submitting the form by our HTTP request where we will be creating a new post. So I will check for whether the form title is valid or not. So I can say form.title. So on the form we have an ID of title on our input element. So as you can see here, on our input type text, for title we have the ID of title. So we can access this input control by saying form.title. To access the text area we can say form.description. So let us go back to our script file and say form.title dot value, so we can get the value for our input control, and then trim it from both the sides, and then check for the length property, and if that comes out to be 0 then your input form control is invalid. Form.description dot value dot trim from both the sides dot length 0. So if that is the case, you have to set the error message. So I can say document dot query selector and error feedback, where we will render the error message, and I will add the class of error. So I'll add to the class list the class of error, and when we add the class of error to the class list pertaining to the error message element, the error will appear, display as block, and color will set to red. Now if everything goes fine, we have the valid title and the description, then we will make it to line number 78, and then we can take on the title for your new post. So I can say const new post title form.title.value, and then you can take the new post description form.description.value, and then what you can do is that you can create a new post, and within the new post you can first define the ID for the post. So I can say math.floor math.random into 10,000. So we'll take a random number, multiply that with 10,000, and then we will take the floor value of that. And then title will be set to new post title. Description, not description, because the API takes on a body key for your new post, so we'll stay consistent with that. So body is new post description. Now let us send our HTTP request to create a new post on our backend API. So I can say await, and we are already decorating our function with async keyword, so we can use await in our function, and I can send a HTTP request. The method will be a post, and then the URL will be https://JSON placeholder .typicode.com/posts, and then I can stringify our new post. So our post is in form of an object. I will convert that to a string, and then we'll send it over the wire to our server API. So new post. And after sending the request to the backend, what we can do is we can reset our form. So I can say form.title.value, set that to an empty string. Form.description.value, set that to an empty string. And in the catch block, we will receive an error. So I can say console log ex, and then I can create a new constant error, new error, and say something went wrong, and throw that error. So let us check the functionality for the code that we have written till now in the browser. So we are getting all the posts. Now let us try to create a new post without specifying any title. So I'll give some blank spaces here and here also, and let us create the post. Okay, so we are getting nothing. I think I forgot to return after line number 76. So once our validation fails, we should return and stop the function from getting executed any further. And let us set the error message here right above, and say document.querySelector error feedback .text content, and set that to please provide the required data. Let us go back to the browser to see the output. Now if I try to create a new post by passing on empty spaces here, you can see we are getting the error message of please provide the required data. But if we specify a post title, say a new day, and the description is this is a new day, and let us create on the new post. So the request went successful. We are getting 201. That indicates that the new post was successfully created on the backend. So this is how our post request works. But right now what we want to do is, once the post is created, we want to clear this error message off. So right after we get this error, when the user supplied an invalid title and description, and again he tries to submit the title and description for the post, but now it is right, we have to clear off this error. So for that, what we can do is we can go right above our try block, and here we can say document.querySelector error feedback, and right before the validation that we are doing, we will clear off the class of error. So I'll remove the class of error from our error message element. Okay, so let us see this now in action. First, what I will do is basically supply the invalid title and description. So we get the error message, please provide the required data. And once we give the required data, this is a new day and something, and then we create the post. You can see the request went successful and the error got cleared off. And you can see in the response we are getting an ID of 101, because the previous post that we created will not persist in our data store, as I told you. So we are having 100 posts. This new post got created and it is temporary. Okay, so title will be set to this is a new day and body is set to this. Now let us define a function to delete a post. Okay, so if we click on a particular list item, that list item should go away and our UI should react to that. So let us go back to our editor. In the bind events, I will add a new event listener. So list.add event listener. So I'm using the event delegation model. So I'm attaching a single event listener on our list element instead of attaching multiple event listeners on our list items. So whenever a list item gets clicked, the event will bubble up and will reach to the list that we are having. So it will bubble up and the event listener that we are having on the list will get triggered. So list.addEventListener, once you click on the list, you can delete a post. So let us define the handler for this. I can say function delete a post and it will receive the event object const post item. So whatever post item that we clicked on, so event, so what is the target for event, and then we will try to reach the closest list item. So it is possible that we click on the post title or the post description, but we are targeting the entire list item in which the title and description is residing. So we have to reach the closest list item. So we can say dot closest and the specific list item that we want to delete. And then I can say await delete from server, and I can pass on the ID that we will be using. We have to remove the clicked li from the UI, and for that I can say event.target dot the nearest or the closest li to the target, and I can remove that particular list item, and that's it. So now let us define the delete from server method to finish with this functionality, and let us decorate the delete post handler with the async keyword. Now let us define the function async function delete from server, and this will receive the ID for the post item that we are trying to delete. Let us use the try catch mechanism here. I can again send a HTTP request with a method of delete, and the URL will be, I will use backticks https:// JSON placeholder typicode.com/post/id, and this request will not require any data, so we'll omit that. And then what I can do is, once our deletion went successful, so I will set up a success message by saying document.querySelector, and I will set the success feedback dot text content to one post got deleted, and then I can say document.querySelector success feedback dot classlist dot add, and I will add the class of success. Will give us the class of success, so this class. So on our success feedback div, we'll get the class of success, and then display will be blocked, color will be set to green, and it will show one post got deleted when the post gets successfully deleted. Now what I can do is, after a time span of 2 seconds, I want to remove the class of success so that our success feedback again gets a display property of none, so it goes away. So document.querySelector dot success feedback dot classlist, and I will remove the class of success. And in the catch block, what I will do is I will first log the error to the console, and I will define a new error, and I will say something went wrong, and I can throw the error. So let us check the output for the code in the browser. So now if we click on a list item, so we are sending the delete request, and you can see it went successful, so we get a status of 200. Again we click on one, you can see one post got deleted. Now lastly one thing I want to do is that, suppose if we specify an invalid title and an invalid description and click on the create button, we are getting please provide the required data. But now I want that if someone presses a key or a key up event occurs on these fields like this, then the error message should disappear and the display property for that should be set to none. So it's very easy to achieve. So what I will do is I will go back to our bind events handler, and here right below our submit handler, so I can say form.addEventListener, and on a key up event, what I want to do is I want to clear off my error. And then what we can do is we can define a function clear error, and this will receive the event object. So if we do have a value in our target element, so in this case an input fields that are there in your form element, so event.target.value. so if we do have one, then what we can do is we can say document.querySelector dot error feedback dot class list dot remove, and I will remove the class of error to clear off the error. Okay, so let us try this in our browser. So first of all, what will happen is if I submit an empty form, we are getting please provide the required data, but if we enter some data, you can see the error message is now gone and we can successfully create a new post. One thing more, what I can do is that if I go above here also, if I comment this out and use the clear error and pass on the event object, so let us see whether this works or not. So I will give blank spaces here and click on create, but if I type on some values, so in the title field and the description, click on create, this works fine. You can see the post successfully got created with a status code of 201. And let us test the functionality of our complete application. So if I click on the post, you can see it got successfully deleted. So this was all about the video on HTTP requests and a demo application on HTTP requests. So if you like the video, do give it a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and I will see you guys in the very next video.